She said it so casually I almost missed it. He actually thinks those kids are his. The sentence slipped down the hallway like a razor wrapped in silk. I froze in the entryway, one hand on a caramel macchiato, wedding ring catching porch light. The cup sweated. My spine did too. 14 years of marriage and 5 words cut it open. I didn't burst in. I didn't ask who. I listened. Laura's laugh, familiar, private, answered for me. In that beat, the house I paid for felt borrowed. The photos on the wall stared back like witnesses. Something inside me went quiet, the kind of quiet that means the storm is choosing where to land. I let the coffee slip. It hit tile, brown shrapnel, our life in droplets. I picked up the pieces, wiped the floor, and fixed my face in hallway mirror. I did the dangerous thing a husband can do. I smiled, walked into the kitchen, and said nothing. 14 years looks like a row of picture frames down a hallway. Florida beaches, school concerts, birthdays where the cake leaned but the smiles didn't. I remember the first mortgage payment and the night we ate takeout on the floor because the couch hadn't arrived. We said, "This is ours," and clinked paper cups. I handled repairs and late fees. She handled color swatches and playlists. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, like a good truck that always starts. That's what I thought marriage meant, showing up even when the weather turns. So when I heard that sentence, the frames didn't just hang there, they stared. Every promise felt like a receipt with the ink running. I wanted to believe there was a misunderstanding, that the world hadn't shifted. But the truth has a weight you feel in your ribs. The floor didn't move. My foundation did. I set the cup down, and something else down with it, my old certainty. If you've been married long enough, you learn the quiet tells, the "I'm fine" that lasts too long. The phone turned face down, the way 2 people can share a bed and sleep on separate islands. I kept working late. She kept saying, "Do what you need." I thought we were being adults, 2 lives braided, each thread carrying weight. Looking back, the braid was fraying. She smiled in public, but her eyes clocked exits. I brought home flowers. She moved the vase without smelling them. I called it a season. People in their 30s and 40s say that we're in a tough season. It helps you live with drafts in the house. But seasons end. Drafts become leaks. You don't notice the cold until your hands won't warm up. That night, hearing her voice from the hallway, I realized the temperature had dropped months ago. I just kept throwing logs on a fire that was already out. I stepped closer, and the air turned thinner. Her words slid through the crack of the door like smoke under a bedroom window. He actually thinks those kids are his. My hand tightened around the cup. Cardboard bit my palm. I could hear her pacing, heels over hardwood, each step a small countdown. I've been stunned before. Car accidents, business calls gone sideways. But this was a different kind of hit. It didn't slam me. It hollowed me. Nerves went quiet like the power went out in my body. People imagine rage, but shock is colder. It freezes you where you stand, face to face with the thing you prayed wasn't real. I stared at the family photo on the entry table. The smiles looked like strangers cosplaying forgiveness. A laugh floated from the phone and my chest forgot how to rise. I wasn't ready to confront. I needed air, context, something that made sense. Instead, I got the softest laugh I'd ever loved turning into a blade. "Can you believe it, Ryan?" she said. And there it was. The name. Not a ghost, not a rumor, a man you could Google and meet for coffee. The syllables slid out like she'd said them 1,000 times in rooms I paid for. I felt the heat crawl up my neck, then stop. I made a choice older men learn the hard way. I didn't rush the explosion. I let the tape run. Her voice changed, lighter, younger, the way she used to sound when a song we loved came on in the car. He laughed back, and in that sound I heard a plan, not an accident. It's strange, the detail your mind clings to. Mine noticed the draft from the front door and the faint citrus from her candle. The ordinary kept happening while my life didn't. I could end it now, storm in, flip the table, or I could do the harder thing, know for sure. I closed my eyes and memorized their laughter. I wiped the spill, washed my hands, and walked into the kitchen like a man returning from an errand. She looked up with surprise, so clean it could pass inspection. "You're home early," she said, kissing my cheek like we were still us. I smiled back, the kind that keeps pictures intact. People my age know how performance works. You go to work, you bury your father, you pay the bill you didn't expect. You learn to hold the line. I held it. I asked about her day, and she gave me the kind of answer with no nouns in it. Busy. You know how it is. I nodded. My heart wanted to pound the walls. My hands reached for silverware instead. That's the strange mercy of habit. It gives you something to do when you should be collapsing. I set plates, folded napkins, and slid the mask into place. It fit too well. Across from me, she wore one too, and smiled. We ate lasagna she'd plated like a magazine page. Basil sprig, clean edges. The kids told school stories I would normally stretch into bedtime jokes. I counted their freckles and felt a wave I couldn't name. Across the table, Laura laughed on cue. Her hand brushed mine like a reflex you keep out of politeness. I reached for the salt, grateful for something I could fix. That's what men my age do. We fix. Hinges, budgets, moods. But this wasn't a loose screw. It was a fault line under the house. I took a bite, complimented the sauce, and felt like a man complimenting a painting in a building on fire. The room smelled like oregano and something burnt. Maybe the edges, maybe us. When the kids ran off, Laura asked if I was okay. I said, just tired. It was true, but not the way she thought. I cleared the plates and heard my own voice from far away. Steady, pleasant, not mine. When the house went quiet, I sat in my office and opened folders I hadn't clicked in years. Ethan's first swim lesson, Maya asleep on my chest in a hospital chair, Laura in a sundress at Barton Springs. These aren't just pictures. They're anchors. People in their 40s know this. You think you'll remember, and then life erases the edges. So you keep evidence of the good. I let the slideshow roll and asked myself the ugliest question. Was any of it real? The answer didn't come. What came was a second question that felt truer. Did it matter for who I am to them now? I felt the sting in my eyes and didn't fight it. Tears aren't weakness at this age. They're pressure valves. I breathed, slow and deep, and promised the dark room one thing. I would not turn my children into collateral. The screen timed out. The room went black. Somewhere down the hall, a clock ticked like a metronome for the next move. I lay back and replayed our vows. Not the fancy words, the real ones. The ones you say on Tuesdays when the water heater dies and the dog throws up on the rug. I remembered holding her hands, younger, steadier, and promising to try when trying wasn't romantic. I believed in maintenance love, oil changes, not fireworks. Maybe she wanted a parade. I gave her a calendar. That thought hurt, then humbled me. It's easy to blame when you're bleeding. Harder to admit you missed signals while chasing the life you thought would keep everyone safe. But this wasn't about missed date nights. This was about truth. A marriage can survive boredom. It can't survive fraud. I felt the difference in my bones. I pressed my palm to my chest and said the quietest line I've ever said to myself. You will not be cruel. It steadied me more than sleep could. The ceiling held my whisper and handed it back. By sunrise, I knew what I wouldn't do. I wouldn't break things to feel better for 5 minutes. Men pay for those minutes with years. I made coffee I didn't want and wrote 3 words on a yellow pad. Proof, not rage. I thought about every older man who ever told me, son, take your time, then take your stand. I wasn't anyone's son anymore, but the advice still fit. I listed steps like a project at work. Call a lawyer, check the accounts, find a PI, protect the kids. Each line steadied my pulse. The goal wasn't punishment. It was clarity. Not to win an argument, but to tell the truth so clean it couldn't be spun. I looked in the mirror and saw a man I recognized again. Not unhurt, not untouched, but responsible. I folded the note into my pocket, kissed my kids on their heads as they slept, and walked out into the Austin morning. The day felt new. The mission did too. The next morning, I did what a lot of men my age do when the gut won't quiet. I called someone who lives in Fax. A buddy from church gave me a name. Quiet reputation, straight rates, no cowboy drama. We met at a coffee shop off Burnett Road. He looked like every little league coach I ever knew. Ball cap, plain jacket, eyes that miss nothing. I told him I needed confirmation, not fireworks. He slid a short form across the table. Discretion clauses, timelines, what he could and couldn't do. It felt like signing for a transmission repair. Not cheap, but cheaper than the car dying on I-35. He asked for 3 places Laura might go when she ran errands. I gave him the domain, her favorite studio, and a friend's condo she swore was empty. He nodded, no judgment. As I left, he said, "You'll sleep better with information." I didn't argue. I just gripped the steering wheel and waited for truth to start its slow walk. 2 days later, my phone buzzed with a text. "Check your email." In the subject line, Tuesday, 11:47 p.m. I clicked and saw Laura under a street lamp, silver dress, Ryan's hand at the small of her back like it lived there. The kiss was not a mistake. It was choreography. I felt the air leave me, calm and clean, the way it does right before a storm hits your pasture. The private eye included timestamps and a second angle from across the street. No guessing games. No fuzzy silhouettes. I stared until the light on my laptop dimmed. When I finally blinked, I noticed my reflection in the black screen. A man who pays for this house, that lamp, those nights. I didn't throw anything. I didn't call anyone. I pressed save, printed 2 copies, and slid them into a manila folder. There's a difference between suspicion and proof. That line, once invisible, had a face now. I logged into our Chase account, the way you do when you're budgeting for braces or a summer trip. Only this time I wasn't looking for vacations. I was looking for ghosts. I printed 3 months of statements and laid them on the dining table like a map. Older folks will know this drill. Yellow highlighter, sticky notes, a pen that clicks too loud. Most charges were familiar. Groceries, gas, Target runs that always go over. But there were patterns you feel before you name. Midweek transfers to Cole Solutions LLC, a vendor I'd never hired. Hotel incidentals in town when she said she was at book club. I circled dates, made columns, wrote questions in the margins like a man talking to his future self. When you rebuild a deck, you look for soft spots. Money works the same. I tapped my ring on the wood. The rhythm slowed my breathing. The numbers weren't lying. They were leaving breadcrumbs. There's a smell to bad money, the same way a fridge tells on you when something's gone off. I kept seeing small transfers, not enough to scream theft, just enough to hide in a busy life. Consulting, supplies, rush fee. If you've run a business, you've seen those words used as smoke. I cross-checked the dates with my calendar and found the gaps. Days Laura said she was helping a client choose tile while a hotel downtown charged our card for amenities. I don't need to know what the amenities were. The label was the point. I opened a new spreadsheet and gave it a boring name, something no one would click. Line by line, I built a picture any accountant could follow. I wasn't chasing drama. I was building a bridge a judge could walk across. When the totals popped at the bottom, my stomach settled into a new kind of quiet. The trail didn't just exist, it repeated. At home, I became a student of small tells. She laughed at texts without opening them. She wore perfume on errand runs, but not for dinner. She started wearing a hoodie of mine when she went out late, like camouflage made of memory. If you're over 30, you know how tiny habits give you away. The pause before a lie, the overly tidy calendar. I noticed the way she placed her phone screen down but kept it close, like a skittish dog. At bedtime, she asked about my day to steer the conversation away from hers. I answered simply, left space, watched her fill it with soft, empty words. The kids still needed help with homework, still left socks on the couch. That normalcy saved me. It reminded me what mattered and what I could not afford to break. I tucked them in, turned off the hall light, and stood there long enough to hear the house breathe. It was learning my silence. Doubt is sneaky. It sounds like wisdom. Be fair, Mark. Don't jump. I took a late walk around the block and remembered times I'd rushed to judgment and had to apologize. Older men live with those apologies. They make you slower and kinder. So I asked the hard question. If this is a misunderstanding, can you forgive yourself for the damage you caused by accusing? The answer mattered. It kept the lid on my temper and my mouth shut at breakfast. But another truth pressed back. If you ignore what you've seen, you're not noble, you're scared. I held both thoughts like weights at the gym, one in each hand, trying not to lean. At the corner, a motion light snapped on, washing the sidewalk in sudden honesty. I took that as my cue. My job was not to be judge or jury yet. My job was to keep gathering clean facts until doubt ran out of places to sit. I called a lawyer I'd used years ago when a contractor skipped town. We met at a diner that still serves coffee in heavy mugs and calls you hun. He didn't fish for gossip. He asked about structure, accounts, titles, beneficiaries. Older folks appreciate that. Start with what's on paper. I laid out what I knew and what I suspected. He listened like a mechanic listening to a rattle he can already name. Then he said the line that set my path. Protect your assets first, emotions later. He explained trusts, temporary holds, and how to document without tipping your hand. Nothing dramatic, just procedures that keep families from losing twice. He slid a checklist across the table, simple enough to fold into my pocket. Move slow, sign nothing without eyes on it, and don't announce your plans. I paid the bill, left too much tip out of habit, and walked to my truck feeling older in a good way, sober, steadied, ready. Back home, I opened a fresh folder on a private drive and gave it the most boring name on my computer. Inside, I made 4 subfolders: financial, surveillance, communications, DNA. I scanned receipts, exported PDFs, saved voicemails, and wrote short summaries like I was talking to the future me who might forget why this mattered. If you've ever settled an estate or cleaned out a parent's filing cabinet, you know the relief of clear labels. I checked timestamps, renamed files, and backed the whole thing up to a thumb drive I hid inside an old toolbox. The work slowed my heartbeat and sped my purpose. By midnight, the folder looked like a case someone else could understand without me in the room. That was the mini goal. Make the truth portable. I clicked through each tab once more, then closed the laptop. The house was dark and honest. I could feel the ground under me again, thin but solid. I stood in the doorway of Maya's room, watching her breathe, the kind of peace you don't mess with. On the dresser sat her hairbrush, pink handle, a few strands caught in the bristles. There are moments in a father's life that feel like crossing a line you never wanted to see. This was one. I took the brush gently, the way you'd lift a note you're not ready to read, and placed a few strands into the envelope the lab had mailed. I labeled it with the date and slipped it into my jacket. People will judge this move both ways. I've lived long enough to accept that. I kissed her forehead, whispered a promise I meant, and walked back down the hall with steps I measured, slow as prayer. At the kitchen table, I sealed the envelope and stared at my hands. They looked like my father's. Steady, not because they didn't shake, but because they shook and kept going. A week later, a plain envelope arrived. No drama, just the weight of a new chapter. I signed for it like it was a package of light bulbs, carried it to my office, and sat down. The sound of the house, the fridge hum, the dog's nails on tile, felt louder. I set the envelope on the desk and didn't open it. Not yet. I took one long breath, the kind my doctor keeps reminding me to take, and read my yellow pad note again. Proof. Not rage. I thought about every step since the hallway, every restraint, every small choice to act like the man I want my son to become. Then I broke the seal. Paper slid out, clinical and calm. My eyes found the line that changes families, the line you can't unknow. The numbers didn't blink. The room didn't spin. Something quieter happened, like a lock clicking open on a door you've leaned against too long. I stood up, taller and heavier, and knew the next move. I slit the envelope with a house key and slid the pages out like they might bite. Clinical font, calm headings. I scanned for the line everyone looks for and hopes to miss. Probability of paternity, 0%. The 0 didn't yell. It just sat there, steady as a stop sign. My throat went dry the way it does when the doctor calls after routine labs and says, "We need to talk." If you're over 30, you know that moment, when the floor stays put but your balance doesn't. I read it twice to make sure I wasn't protecting myself with a typo. No typo. The air felt colder. I could hear the fridge hum and the neighbor's mower like the world was bragging about normal. I set the paper down, then set it down again like I'd dropped it wrong. I thought about calling someone and realized there wasn't a number to dial. There was only this sentence. And now, me. I took 2 steps toward the kitchen and the room tilted. Not spinning, tilting, like the house had decided to lean a few degrees on its own. I reached for the counter and hit the coffee mug instead. It skipped across tile, kissed the baseboard, and shattered into the kind of mess you feel in your knees. I knelt with paper towels like a man fixing a flood with napkins. Older folks will understand. Sometimes your hands need a job your heart can't do yet. I picked up a shard and saw our reflection bent in it, me on the floor of a life I thought I built straight. The mug said, "World's okayest dad," a Father's Day joke the kids loved. I laughed once, short and sharp, because grief is rude like that. A drop of coffee slid toward a grout line and disappeared. That was the image that stuck, something sweet going dark where you can't scrub. That night, I stood in their doorway with the paper folded in my back pocket like a secret you wish were a lie. Ethan was sprawled sideways, a textbook tenting off his chest. Maya had her rabbit tucked under her arm, thumb barely loose from a dream. I sat on the edge of her bed and the mattress sighed, remembering me. I placed my hand on Ethan's shoulder, then on Maya's hair, and waited for something inside me to decide. Biology is loud on paper, quieter in a dark room where a kid rolls toward you because you're warm. People older than me told me once, "You don't love them because they're yours. They're yours because you love them." I didn't get it then. I heard it now. I pulled Maya in closer than usual. She murmured, "You okay, Dad?" I said, "I am now." It was true in one way and not in another. Both truths fit. Both held. By morning, the shock had cooled into something clearer. Not calmer, clearer. I didn't lose my kids last night. I lost her. That sentence landed in the kitchen with the weight of a box you've been moving room to room, refusing to unpack. I poured coffee I didn't want and watched steam rise like a sermon I needed to hear. The vows we made sounded different in this light, not for better or worse, but for honesty or nothing. You reach an age where you can forgive boredom, debt, even distance. You can't forgive a story built on a grave. I wasn't the villain in her version. I was the prop. That thought hurt and helped. It freed me from fixing what wasn't mine to fix. I looked at the doorway where I'd once overheard her laugh and felt something unclench. I whispered, "I'm done saving your lie." The room didn't answer. It didn't have to. I finally did. I opened my yellow pad and wrote 3 lines like a man drafting a will. Protect the kids. Protect the assets. Protect your name. Anger wanted the pen. I didn't hand it over. Men my age learn this late. Fury feels like action, but it spends like a bad loan. I chose investments, quiet steps that grow. I called the lawyer for next moves, scheduled the PI for a wider net, and set reminders to change passwords that shouldn't have needed changing. Then I added a 4th line and underlined it. No scenes, not in front of the kids, not for the neighbors, not for the internet. I pictured the backyard lights on her birthday and felt the steady click of a lock. Mine, not hers. I don't need revenge. I need clarity everyone can see in daylight. I folded the pad, slid it into the drawer, and exhaled. The plan wasn't loud, but it was finally mine. The PI texted, "Clip in your inbox." I waited until the kids were at school, then clicked play. Laura in a hoodie of mine, grocery bags in hand, walking into Ryan's apartment like she'd done it 100 times. The camera angle was clean, timestamp bright as daylight. He opened the door with that easy smile people mistake for honesty. They didn't rush. They moved like routine, keys on the counter, a kiss that knew its way home. I paused on the frame where her hand rested on his shoulder, right where my hand used to fit when we crossed parking lots. My chest tightened, then steadied. Evidence doesn't hate you. It helps you stop lying to yourself. I saved the file to the folder, printed a still, and slid it under surveillance. Honest paper beats pretty words. I closed the laptop and stared at the wall until my breathing matched the AC vent. The pretending had ended. The work had begun. I pulled out the spreadsheet and set it beside our wall calendar, the one filled with orthodontist appointments and game days. Account entries look like noise until you give them a clock and an address. Tuesday transfers, Wednesday client dinners, Thursday gas fill-ups across town. I put a dot next to each charge and drew lines to the PI timestamps. The picture came into focus like an old TV warming up. Older folks know the comfort of order. When the shelves are labeled, you can breathe. Line by line, the weeks told on themselves. An Uber from our street to his block. A florist receipt on a day I remember grilling chicken and wondering why the marinade tasted off. The more I mapped, the less I guessed. By the time I finished, the calendar wasn't a family plan. It was a ledger. I labeled the tab Reconciled. The word felt honest. It also felt like a bell tolling something done. I opened project folders from Lone Star Properties and compared bids Ryan handled to what vendors actually invoiced. On paper, the numbers rhymed. In the margins, they didn't. Duplicate consulting fees with new names, change orders that padded totals, small enough to hide, consistent enough to prove intent. If you've ever found out your dad paid for the same brake job twice, you know the quiet anger of realizing someone saw you coming. I cross-checked emails. Ryan's tone sounded helpful, the way a fox reassures the henhouse. "Let me take this off your plate, Mark." He already had. I stapled each suspect page to a summary and marked it with red tags, not for drama, for clarity. Fraud doesn't need adjectives. It shows up as math. I didn't slam the drawer or curse his name. I just lined up every piece so a stranger could follow the trail without me saying a word. Truth walks better with a handrail. I spent the evening doing the unglamorous work that saves families. Scanning, naming, backing up. Financial 2022 Q4.pdf. Video domain 1147pm.mov. Text thread lr export.txt. Boring names stay invisible. I put duplicates on a thumb drive, then a second one, because men my age have lost photos to hard drive failures and never forgive themselves. One drive went into a safe. The other I slid into an empty socket set in the garage, under the 11mm no one touches. I printed an index and taped it under the desk drawer. Then I tested the folder like a fire drill. If I had 5 minutes to leave, could I grab the truth? Yes. That answer lowered something in my shoulders. I wiped the counter, turned off the kitchen light, and listened to the house settle. In the quiet, the plan felt less like suspicion and more like stewardship. I wasn't hoarding pain, I was organizing it into proof. That difference matters when the storm finally knocks. Laura asked, "You good?" as she leaned on the island, hair tucked like a commercial for sincerity. "Just tired," I said, stirring coffee that didn't need stirring. She smiled, gentle as a porch light. "You've been distant." The word landed like a dare. I met her eyes and nodded once. "Work's heavy. People our age can talk for 20 minutes without touching the thing in the room." We did. She described errands and a friend who might need help moving. I asked if she'd be home for dinner Friday. "Should be," she said, voice light, eyes calculating. The whole scene felt like church clothes covering a bruise. I added one harmless question. "Everything okay with the card? Chase pinged me today." She blinked. "Oh? Probably a glitch." We both let the sentence die. I rinsed my mug and thought, this is what stage acting looks like in a kitchen. She kissed my cheek. I filed the kiss with the receipts. Ryan messaged me like nothing ever cracked. "Got a lead, boutique retail build-out. High margin, quick turnaround, you in?" Men in their 30s to 60s know that pitch tone. Urgent, friendly, a shortcut disguised as an opportunity. I stared at the bubbles and felt the old impulse to close a deal just to feel capable again. Then I remembered the ledger lines and the midnight videos. I typed slow, "Tell me more." He sent bullet points, numbers that looked good enough to be false. "We can route client outreach through me. You're swamped, brother." That word, brother, hit like a hand on the back that pushes, not supports. I replied, "Let's discuss Friday." Then I saved the thread as a PDF and forwarded it to my proof folder. Bait works on hungry men. I decided to arrive full of patience, full of facts. His eagerness told me what I needed. He believed I was still asleep. Good. Stay asleep, I thought. At lunch, I called Ryan and gave him my best busy owner voice. "I like it," I said. "Let's move small to start." He talked fast, grateful, the way you thank a lifeguard who never got wet. I let him outline his plan and asked for things that create paper, draft contracts, vendor lists, proposed emails. He agreed to send everything by nightfall. People who cut corners hate documentation. He embraced it too quickly. That told me he was confident or sloppy, maybe both. After the call, I wrote a note to myself. Say yes to get receipts. Then I texted Laura. Ryan mentioned a new retail client. You know anything about it? She replied, vaguely. Sounds promising. Vaguely. The word people use when they already know too much. I put my phone down and felt the timeline tightening. Buying time felt like stacking sandbags before a river crests. It looks small in the moment. It's how towns stay dry. I set my cell to record calls where it was legal and documented the rest in summary notes immediately after. Memory is a kind liar, especially when your heart's involved. The recordings weren't cinematic. They were better. Laura's tone dropping when she said we, Ryan's reflexive, don't worry about that part, the pauses that reveal more than answers. I saved each file with the date and a 5-word description I could search later. After dinner, when the kids were building a blanket fort, Laura took a call on the patio. I stepped into the pantry, pressed record on a small voice memo, and let the crickets cover my breathing. He's softening, she said. He'll suggest the split. Ryan's laugh rolled in like a bar door. Once the money moves, we move. I didn't shake. I didn't cry. I checked the audio level, stopped the recording, and labeled it. Some men keep journals. I kept truth with a timestamp. My lawyer and I met again, this time with a stack of folders and a quiet understanding that this wasn't theoretical anymore. He didn't waste my time. Here's your if-then plan, he said, sliding a checklist across the table. If she files first, then we file these. If he contacts clients directly, then we send this notice. If assets start moving, then we initiate holds. It was the opposite of drama. Boring, thorough, exactly what older adults appreciate when life gets loud. We discussed trusts for the kids, temporary custody schedules that prioritize stability, and how to stage a disclosure so the facts speak, and I don't have to. He reminded me, don't gloat. Judges dislike performers. I nodded. I wasn't looking for applause. I was building a landing that wouldn't break us. When we stood, he said, "You're doing the hard kind of brave." It landed where I needed it. I left with a folder labeled contingency. Back home, I sat at the kitchen table with the folder open and the backyard lights off. The house hummed, unaware it was a witness. My phone buzzed. A heart emoji from Laura, a thumbs up from Ryan. I answered neither. I looked at the files. Money that wandered, nights that didn't, words that confessed without meaning to. A simple truth surfaced, calm as a lake at dawn. The less noise I made, the more they revealed. Silence wasn't surrender. It was a mirror. I wrote a final line on my yellow pad and underlined it twice. When they think I'm blind is when I see best. The sentence didn't feel clever. It felt earned. I closed the folder, checked on the kids, and stood in their doorway until my shoulders lowered. Tomorrow would bring more steps. Tonight, I had what I needed. A plan, a record, and the patience to let the truth finish its work. Laura planned her backyard birthday like a small wedding, string lights, rental chairs, a playlist labeled Golden Hour. She walked the lawn with a measuring tape and a smile that didn't check with her eyes. I carried boxes from the garage, nodded at her ideas, and took mental notes on outlets and sightlines like a man mapping a stage. Older folks know this rhythm. One spouse builds the mood, the other keeps the power from tripping. She handed me a list: flowers, sparklers, a cake with a silver 39. I said I'd handle it, and meant it in more ways than she knew. As she talked centerpiece heights, I pictured a screen against the fence, the canvas where truth would choose its light. She hugged me on the porch, her chin on my shoulder, and said, "This will be perfect." I answered, "It will," and let the sentence do 2 jobs. The yard felt quiet, like a theater before the curtain lifts. I decided to be kinder than I felt. Not performative, just gentle enough to let her relax into her version of the story. I brought coffee to her desk, asked about seating charts, and listened, like a man who still needed her opinion. The more she softened, the more the plan sharpened. If you've raised teens, you know this trick. Stay calm, and they talk. Laura talked. "Let's seat Ryan near the grill," she said. "He's great with people." I nodded and made a mental map, projector angle, guests' sight lines, where the power cord could run without catching feet. I fixed a loose fence slat and told her it'd hold. I tested the outdoor speakers with soft Motown that made the afternoon feel safe. She leaned into the music, into me, into the lie. I didn't push back. I tucked the moment into my pocket like a key. Kindness wasn't approval. It was camouflage. And it fit. In the office, I opened a new project labeled Happy Laura Draft, the kind of title a curious spouse would skim past. Slide 1. A photo of our family at the beach, just long enough to keep suspicion asleep. Slide 2. A hard cut to the street lamp kiss. After that, I stacked the proof like bricks. Timestamps, transfers, emails. Between each, a beat of silence for the room to understand before it moved on. Older adults know, a good presentation respects the audience's heart rate. I added captions in clean fonts, no tabloid flair. The truth didn't need neon. I tested fades, trimmed audio so every word landed, and set the final slide to the DNA line. It looked almost plain, which is why it worked. I pressed play from start to end and timed the sequence with a kitchen timer like I was practicing CPR. When it finished, the room held its breath. I did too, and saved twice. The audio files mattered more than any photo. Voices carry fingerprints. I dropped in the call where Laura said, "He still thinks they're his," then layered the one where Ryan laughed and promised, "We'll move when he's soft." Clean clips, no tricks, volume set so a backyard could hear without strain. I gave each line a title card with date and time, a simple anchor for people who have lived long enough to appreciate receipts. As I tested, I felt the old temptation to add commentary, to cue the crowd how to feel. I cut those thoughts. If you're over 30, you've learned that silence can be the loudest witness. The audio hit harder when it landed next to images and bank lines. I listened once more through headphones, then through cheap outdoor speakers. Both made my jaw clench. Good. If it reached me here, it would reach them there. I exported the file and watched the progress bar crawl. That afternoon, Ryan swung by with a grin and a bottle of Napa Cab he couldn't pronounce. "For the Queen," he joked, setting it on the island like tribute. Men like him wear confidence like a cologne, loud at first, cheap by the end of the night. I wiped the condensation ring he left and smiled back just enough to pass. He pitched his new project again, margin, timeline, handshake, and I gave him my favorite word when I need distance. Interesting. He clapped my shoulder, too familiar, too sure, and said, "Tomorrow's gonna be a movie." I almost laughed. He had no idea he'd been cast. When he left, I turned the bottle to read the label. Unforgettable. The irony landed where I live now. I set it beside the cake knife and thought about how men my age mark moments. Not with toasts, but with decisions. Tomorrow the room would taste tannins and truth. One would age well, the other already had. Before bedtime, I sat on the floor between Ethan's sneakers and Maya's stuffed rabbit and let the noise of their room refill me. He asked about a science project. She asked if the lights would stay on in the backyard. "They will," I said, and meant it in more ways than one. I pulled them in and told them I loved them in the regular voice, not the brave one. Older parents know the difference. My father used to say, "You're a man when your strength makes other people feel safe." That line came back like a porch light you forgot you left on. I didn't need revenge. I needed my kids to remember that when the ground moved, their dad did not. I kissed their foreheads, turned out the lamp, and stood in the doorway until my eyes adjusted. In the dark, I repeated a quiet vow. Do no harm to the innocent. Then I added another. Do no favors to the guilty. When the house slept, I rolled the projector cart onto the patio and did a full run. Sound, picture, cables, the slide order that turns doubt into daylight. I checked the extension cords and taped them down the way church volunteers do at Easter. The screen held steady in the breeze. From the fence line, I watched the images bloom and vanish against the canvas. The street lamp kiss, the transfers, the lines you can't unknow. I walked the yard as if I were each person who would stand there. Her mother near the hydrangeas, coworkers by the grill, Ryan hovering with that bottle. I noted where their eyes would land. I built the moment where silence replaces oxygen. Then I powered everything down and felt the click in my chest match the switch. In my pocket, the USB drive felt heavier than metal. It felt like a key to a door I hadn't known how to open. Now I did. At 10:38 p.m., Laura sent a photo of string lights glowing above a clean patio and typed, "I love you. You make everything beautiful." I stared at the words until the screen dimmed. Older couples know how one sentence can feel like a balm and a blade. I thought about the girl I married, the woman I'd protected even from my own anger, and the stranger who would face herself tomorrow. My thumbs hovered over the keyboard, wanting to say something that matched her sentence from a world that no longer existed. I typed back, "Rest. Big day." Then I deleted it. The truth deserved cleaner footing. I set the phone down and let the room go quiet. If love is a verb, tomorrow would decide who had been conjugating it and who had been conjugating excuses. I turned off the lamp and lay still, listening to the house breathe like a dog at my feet. Faithful, waiting, ready. Just before midnight, I sent one line, "Tomorrow will be unforgettable." She replied with a heart and a sparkler, and I could almost hear her laugh from the hallway where this began. Words can be promises or forecasts. Mine was both. I tucked the phone under the charger, checked the drive in my pocket again, and felt a steadiness I hadn't felt since before the crack. If you've ever prepped for a hard meeting or a funeral, you know the strange peace that comes when everything that can be done is done. I set out the extension cord, the remote, the spare batteries, small insurance policies against chaos. Then I looked in the mirror and told the man staring back, "No speeches. Let the facts work." The line landed like a guardrail. I turned off the light and let the dark hold me up. Sleep didn't come fast, but when it did, it came honest. Dawn slid under the blinds like a slow apology. I brewed coffee and watched the timer on the machine sync with the timer in my chest. Today had a weight to it, like the morning you drop a kid at college or clear out your parents' house. You don't rush that weight, you carry it. I walked the yard one more time, tightened a loose bulb, and wiped fingerprints off the projector lens. A neighbor waved from his driveway. I waved back and wondered what secrets sit behind every fence on this street. The rental chairs arrived. The cake did too. I set the knife beside the bottle Ryan brought and straightened the banner Laura picked. "Live loud, love real." I didn't change a letter. I just looked at the words and let them prophesy. Then I checked my watch and felt the smallest smile. The countdown wasn't to chaos, it was to clarity. And clarity, finally, was on schedule. By 6, the yard glowed like a postcard, string lights humming, citronella candles doing their best, neighbors stepping in with potluck smiles. You learn at this age that every gathering carries two stories, the one people post and the one the chairs remember. I greeted folks by name, pointed them toward the brisket, and kept the projector draped like a harmless backdrop. Laura floated from table to table, hugging, laughing, checking on flowers she didn't water. Her mother complimented the lawn. I thanked her and adjusted the speaker volume to comfortable truth. A coworker handed me a salad and said, "You two are goals." I felt the sentence pass through me like a breeze through a screen. Ryan hadn't arrived yet. Good. People took pictures by the banner. Live loud, love real. And I let the words do their quiet job. When the sun slid low and the faces turned gold, I felt the clock in my chest click forward. Showtime was entering the driveway. Laura stepped onto the patio in a silver dress that caught the last light and turned it into a promise she couldn't keep. The applause was polite and warm. She kissed my cheek for the camera. I held steady for the people who didn't know the camera was already rolling somewhere else. 10 minutes later, Ryan arrived with that bottle and a grin he'd practiced in mirrors. "Traffic," he said, handing Laura the wine like an award. He slapped my shoulder. Too familiar, too loud, and I steadied the tray in my other hand. Older adults know this cast. The star, the sidekick, the spouse holding the house up. I guided them toward the center of the yard, where the screen waited like a sleeping witness. Laura squeezed my hand. "Say something nice," she whispered. "Make them cry." I nodded. "I'll try." In my head, the word meant something different. The mic felt light. The moment didn't. I tapped the glass and the backyard settled like a theater at curtain rise. 14 years, I began, and I've learned that beauty isn't in the big days. It's in Tuesday night dishes and finding lost socks. People laughed softly, the kind of laugh that says, "We've lived long enough to agree." I thanked her for the parties she planned, the way she made our house feel like a place you wanted to stay. I meant the sentence, and didn't. That's adulthood, two truths carrying the same plate. I lifted my glass. "Tonight is about meaning," I said, and I brought something meaningful. Heads turned toward the draped screen. Laura's smile stiffened a hair. Ryan's eyes flicked to the projector and back like a man checking exits. "No long speech," I added. "Just a short film about gratitude and truth." I felt my thumb find the remote in my pocket, the way it finds a wedding ring. Click once, breathe twice, begin. The sheet slid off the screen and a beach photo filled the yard. Ethan mid-jump, Maya laughing, Laura's head on my shoulder. People awed and I let them. Then the cut, a street lamp, a frame, a kiss that had muscle memory. The air thinned. You could hear silverware pause. Slide after slide, the story found its own voice. Timestamps, transfers, the florist receipt on a Tuesday that wasn't ours. I kept narration off. The captions did the work. Then the audio. Laura's voice you could recognize blindfolded, light and sharp. "He still thinks they're his." Ryan's laugh followed like a door closing. Older guests stopped chewing. Younger ones stopped filming. The truth has a sound. It quiets rooms that think they're loud. I watched faces tilt from curiosity to comprehension. Laura stepped forward, then back, then forward again, eyes scanning for a place the light couldn't reach. There wasn't one. The story, finally, was choosing its own light. Murmurs tried to form and failed. Laura reached for my arm like a person grabs railings when a boat lurches. "What is this?" she asked, voice threaded with 2 decades and 1 minute. I didn't answer. The next slide did. Bank lines underlined, dates that matched nights she'd said, "Don't wait up." A cousin set down her fork like it weighed a pound. Ryan said, "Mark, let's talk inside," the way a man suggests a hallway when the jury's already seated. A friend stood, another sat. People looked at Laura, then at me, then at Ryan, the way folks look at weather they didn't dress for. She said my name again, smaller now. The audio clip repeated, just long enough for intention to become undeniable. I saw her mother put a hand to her chest and lower it when the room stayed vertical. I clicked to the final section. "Almost done," I said quietly. One more truth needed to land. White screen, black letters. Probability of paternity, 0%. No soundtrack, no voiceover, just the number everyone understands because it doesn't require translation. The backyard went still in that strange, holy way funerals sometimes do, when even the wind agrees to step outside. Laura's mouth opened without a word to wear. Ryan's face lost its cologne. Someone whispered, "Oh God," without meaning to pray. If you've ever heard a fact heavy enough, you know the sound it makes. Nothing. I let the slide hold. 10 seconds. 15. Long enough for denial to look around and find no chairs left. In the far corner, a glass clinked itself back to empty. I lowered the remote. My hands didn't shake. All my shaking had already done its time. I saw my son's soccer coach glance at the kids and then at me, and I gave him a nod that meant I'm here. We can breathe. The number did its job. I stepped forward, not toward her, but toward the space between us where the facts now lived. "This isn't cruelty," I said, steady and low so the back fence could hear. "It's clarity." The words didn't echo. They landed. Laura reached for an explanation that had expired. Ryan aimed for the gate and found shoulders in his way. A chair scraped. Someone coughed the way people do when they wish they weren't somewhere sacred. I didn't argue. I didn't list. The slideshow closed on a photo of our family at the beach, because not all endings come with flames. Some come with water and the choice to come up new. I set down the remote, thanked everyone for celebrating her birthday, and invited the caterer to bring out cake. The room exhaled in fragments. People stood, sat, left, lingered, each person deciding what to do with what they now knew. I didn't move. I didn't need to. The curtain had finally told the truth. The party didn't end so much as deflate. People gathered plates they didn't want anymore and found their keys faster than usual. I stayed near the patio door and watched the shift you only see in grown-up rooms. Eyes avoiding, whispers trimming themselves, folks deciding which story they'll tell on the ride home. Laura tried to catch hands that wouldn't stay. Her cousin muttered something about kids and left. A neighbor hugged me without words, the kind of hug people give at hospitals. Ryan floated by the hydrangeas, suddenly fascinated by his phone. Confidence leaks. You can see the puddle. Laura's mother sat, then stood, then sat again, torn between love and gravity. I didn't gloat. I collected glasses and nodded at goodbyes. When the gate clicked behind the last guest, the yard felt like a theater after a hard show. Confetti of napkins, chairs pointed at a screen that told the truth. Laura turned to me. "Why?" she asked. The night had its own answer, because everyone needed to see. The next morning, I put on the same jacket I wear for parent-teacher conferences and funerals and drove to the precinct. No speeches, just folders. The officer's desk looked like every desk built to hold other people's trouble. Scuffed wood, a plant trying its best, a printer that coughs. I slid the stack across. Financials, timelines, emails, audio transcripts, the PI report. He didn't ask for a story, he asked for order. Older adults know the comfort of that, when feelings step aside and the file speaks. I answered questions like we were building shelves, level, straight, enough anchors to hold weight. "We'll review and advise," he said, which in that room means the wheels have started to turn. On the way out, my phone buzzed. Voicemails, texts, apologies not addressed to anyone in particular. I let them sit. I drove home the long way, past the park where Ethan learned to ride a bike. The air felt clearer. Paper does that. It makes noise choose a corner. 2 days later, a patrol car rolled up outside the office at lunchtime. I watched through the window as officers stepped out with the steady pace of men who do this often. Ryan looked smaller behind glass than he ever did in my kitchen. He tried a smile. It had nowhere to land. They spoke to him quietly, turned him gently, and the cuffs clicked with the soft finality of a seatbelt. I didn't cheer. I didn't film. I signed the additional statements our accountant had prepared and thanked the officers for being professional. In my truck, I sat with the engine off and listened to my breath. Older men will understand this. Justice feels less like fireworks and more like a weight setting down where it always belonged. My phone lit up with mixed messages. Shock, gossip, a few, "You okay?" notes that actually helped. I answered the last group only. "We're steady," I wrote. It was true, and truer because it cost me to say it. She left at 1:13 a.m. when the house was supposed to be asleep. I heard drawers slide with care, hangers breathe, a suitcase zipper choose sides. I stood in the dark at the top of the stairs, not hiding, just letting her feel the shape of the door she'd opened. She paused in the foyer where I'd once heard her laugh on the phone. The silence there held both scenes like frames on the same nail. "Mark," she said softly, maybe to ask, maybe to explain, maybe to float a memory that could carry her bags. I answered with a nod she could sense more than see. No insults, no bargains, just the boundary I'd bled to find. She set her ring on the console, a small sound that hit like a gavel. The door closed without drama, a car started, and the night stitched itself shut. I walked the hallway once and touched the wall. It felt solid again. Emptier, yes, but finally honest. Morning comes even when you'd rather negotiate. I cooked eggs, burned the first batch, and let the kids tease me like they used to. Ethan asked if practice was still on. I said yes and caught the relief in his shoulders. Maya wanted braids. I did my clumsy best and got a smile for effort. Older parents know, routines are rafts. We packed lunches, fed the dog, and left shoes exactly where we always forget not to. After school, we walked the loop at Muller, and I told them the only thing I could promise without lying: you are safe, you are loved, you will not have to earn either. That night we made a blanket fort and ate pizza under it because architecture helps. When the house went quiet, I paid bills, updated passwords, and set a calendar reminder to breathe. Peace didn't arrive like a parade. It showed up in socks matched before bed and laughter that didn't check the doorway. We were starting again, not from zero, from truth. The envelope showed up without a return address, the kind of plain white that hopes to be mistaken for a bill. I opened it over the kitchen sink, thinking it might be a warranty or a reminder. 3 lines, her handwriting looping like it could rewind the clock. I'm pregnant. It's yours. No apology, no context, just a hook meant to pull me back into the old house of mirrors. If you're over 30, you know that feeling, the past knocking like it still has a key. I set the paper down and let the room breathe. The fridge hummed, the dog stretched, life stayed put. For a beat, anger reached for my throat, then loosened. I remembered the party, the files, the promises I made to 2 sleepy foreheads. Payoff isn't revenge, it's release. I folded the letter once, then twice, like I was packing away a season that had already ended. I whispered the rule I'd earned, truth over drama, always. I took the letter to my office and slid open the drawer with the yellow pad. Under the list, protect the kids, protect the assets, protect your name, was a single date circled in ink from 9 months ago. My appointment. My choice. The vasectomy I scheduled when the ground finally told the truth. It wasn't rage, it was resolve. Older men will understand. Sometimes the bravest thing you do is remove a lever someone could use on your worst day. I held the letter beside that circled date and felt the last wire snap between us. No shouting, no courtroom line, just the end of a story that didn't get to write my next chapter. I placed the note in the proof folder, not out of fear, but for record, like you keep a receipt after you've returned the thing that never fit. Then I made 2 lunches, signed a field trip form, and set the table. The future had already chosen its seat. We walked the trail at Muller late, when Texas light turns everything honest. Ethan kicked a pebble like it mattered. Maya squeezed my hand twice, our old code for, "Are we okay?" "We are," I said, and felt the words click into place. We passed families tossing a frisbee, a dad teaching a daughter to ride without training wheels, and I remembered how many small truths build a home. Packed lunches, inside jokes, the way you show up when it's inconvenient. I didn't think about the letter. I thought about ice cream dripping down waffle cones and how both kids laugh with their whole faces. Payoff, I've learned, is not fireworks. It's breathing in rhythm with the people you love and realizing the ache has space around it now. At the Overlook, I took a photo, nothing fancy, just proof of a day that kept its promises. I pulled them close and said the only ending that fits. Justice doesn't always scream. Sometimes it just closes the door quietly.